Welcome to Energy Stew. This is Peter Roth, your host. And I'd like to ask you, how do you identify wellness or lack of it? What is going on that you can say this represents my fullness or my lack of fullness? What does fullness mean? And to help us understand that better is a recurring guest on Energy Stew, the man who wrote the book Luminous Life. He's originally, a long time ago, was an optometrist and really started to understand seeing life in very energetic ways via how we see life. And so he has taken it to higher limits of consciousness and understanding. And so it's so great always to talk with him. Jacob, welcome back to Energy Stew.
Thank you, Peter. It's great to be with you always, and it's great to be with you again today.
Well, thank you. And so this is an interesting understanding that you bring with you about identifying how we can support our wellness, our wholeness. So can you talk about that?
Sure. It's really very simple. We all know the difference when we're feeling well and when we're not.
Okay, that's it.
They say the most important things in life are health and happiness. I have yet to find people who are healthy and unhappy. Usually there's a sense of contentment which underlies the body's ability to function optimally, if you will. And so being in the healthcare field for 45 years, one of the things we've learned is that most of what we call disease is related or significantly contributed to or caused by something called stress.
I've been saying that all physical ailments are psychosomatic.
Okay, same thing.
Right.
So you could say we're all suffering from non-existent incurable disorders. So
Life.
for me, yeah. So for me, it's really quite simple. There are parts of life we are at ease with. We just flow with them easily. And then there are aspects of life that when we encounter them, they shift our state of ease to something we call dis-ease, which is what is the precursor for disease. It's just dis-ease over time creates disease.
Right.
More than 90% of disease is chronic illness. Chronic illness only responds significantly well to what they call changes in lifestyle. What does that mean? It means that you see or relate to your life in a different way than you used to.
Stressfully, you mean?
Yes.
Right.
And so what is stress? We use that term all the time, but what is that? And so for me, stress are the aspects of life we have an allergic reaction to. Now, all of us know what happens if we encounter poison oak or a piece of fish that we're sensitive to or some environmental allergen, and we have an allergic reaction that has both physiological and psychological components. Well, that happens all day in life. We encounter our ex-husbands, our ex-wives, people that we have some unfinished business with, our in-laws, our children, our whatever. and something rears up. It's like the hair on the back of our neck starts to stand up. Our heart pounds a little bit faster, and we experience this thing called stress. And that is something that just wears us down over time. So for me, wellness is something that begins to expand as we become comfortable with the aspects of life that we used to be uncomfortable with. In other words, when the allergens of life, when we become desensitized from those allergens, so when they occur, the response naturally is maybe more neutral or more embracing rather than a recoiling.
So it's the purpose of creating peace in your life and using peaceful means to comfort ourselves in life, about our conditions that we struggle with.
Well, what we call peace is in fact our natural state. Peace is there until we encounter one of those allergens. And so one of the interesting things that I discovered a little more than 40 years ago when I was investigating people's responses to what they perceived as color is I noticed that people seem to like certain colors and dislike others. They felt at ease with some and not so much at ease with others. And it was very, very individually. It could be one way for you and totally different for me, and usually it was. As I began to experiment, I noticed that when I monitored the body's physiology, when someone looked at or even thought about a color they were uncomfortable with, their body started to have a stress-like reaction. And so I began experimenting with this, and what I discovered is that when people looked at or visualized colors they were at ease with, it reminded them of pleasurable events in their life. But when they looked at or visualized colors that they recoiled from, it often they had flashbacks of unresolved issues in their life, things in their life that they may not even cognitively understand, but just caused some reaction inside of them. And so over the years, I found that I could use these colors that triggered up these reactions in very, very small doses, like homeopathic remedies, to help gently dissipate this reactivity and transform it into a level of embrace. And so what I've been doing for years, and I speak about this in the book, the readers of the book can actually go through this process. People can go through a process of noticing how they relate to each of the colors of the spectrum. And then there are ways of utilizing those colors to actually help support the process of wellness. And so what I've noticed is that when the system becomes more receptive to the full spectrum of light, simultaneously we become more accepting of the full spectrum of life. And the reason that is simply this: every physiological function, whether you're a human, an animal, or a plant, is light dependent. Every physiological function is light dependent. The body runs on light, just like many of our buildings and so on today. So when we are unreceptive to a certain portion of the spectrum, we leave certain parts of our humanity in the dark, like putting a plant in the closet. It doesn't get enough light. And so what I've discovered over the years is people, for instance, who are uncomfortable with red and orange, very often, most of the time, will share with me that they have lower back issues, reproductive issues, chronic infections in that part of the body, bladder issues, or things related with those chakras.
Right. The first and second chakras at the bottom are red and orange.
Right. Now, it's interesting, when I was first introduced to the concept of chakras, which was around the mid-70s, I couldn't find any scientific substantiation for that. So I didn't do anything with it. But over the years of working with more than 40,000 people, I started empirically noticing this relationship that the colors they were uncomfortable with, to a very, very high degree, correlated precisely with where in the body they developed physical issues.
Sure.
And so when I then utilize those colors very gently to gradually support the system in opening up to what it had been closed down to, not only did the person find that they were less reactive emotionally to things in their life that used to trigger them, but their overall health and wellness began to improve because they were allowing more light to literally enter the body. And so for me, it was an incredible discovery, if you will, because I remember when I was experimenting with myself, which I always do before I work with people, and I realized that every time I looked at indigo, my heart would start pounding. I remember once giving myself a little bit of indigo light and having a panic attack for hours. I mean, it really pushed me over the edge. And then I came to realize that there were some issues relationally that I'd had with my dad early in life, that for whatever reason, the vibration that I perceived as indigo literally awoke that part of myself. And so as I desensitized that reactivity from indigo, issues in my life started changing very, very dramatically. And people literally begin to open up. And so the bulk of my work the last 40 years is expanding one's physical and emotional receptivity to light, which then translates as a broadening of their acceptance of life itself.
Right. Now I look at the word human and I see it starting with hue,
Right.
which is the full spectrum of color. And so I was looking at your book again, as I've gone through it many times, and found went back to the chapters on color and chakras, but there was one exercise that has to do with tanks of color,
Right.
and also feelings, as you said, feelings about color. And I noticed in myself that the color, I don't have any struggle with any color. As a matter of
Right.
fact, I was just thinking while you were talking that we should all think of what are the favorite colored shirts we like to wear, or what clothing,
Yeah.
sheets that we like, or towels that we like. What colors are we attracted to or not? Which colors don't we want to have
Right.
for us? I think that's meaningful. And also, for me, since I don't have that, I was looking and I was realizing energetically, because I can sense energy, and I was seeing that the tank that had blue in it was only about a third full.
Uh-huh.
That somehow, and a couple of months ago, I knew I needed blue, and I started wearing blue tinted glasses, sunglasses. And I thought that would be helpful. But now, lately, and I don't know if this is not helpful, is that often when I'm at the computer, I'll wear blue blocking glasses
Right.
to block blue. And I'm thinking, why am I blocking blue when I need blue?
Well, that's a very good question. The reason those glasses are valuable to wear when you're at the computer is that when you go out into the sun, which has a tremendous amount of blue light in it, but it also has a tremendous amount of red and near infrared light, and so it all balances out precisely. But the light coming off the computer, the cell phones, the handheld devices, they're created by LEDs, red, green, and blue LEDs. And the blue LEDs have an inordinate amount of power to them in relation to the others. So the reason that there are so many vision issues associated with our time online using computers and cell phones is because you don't have the natural balance that is in the solar spectrum. You're dealing with something that is so out of balance in excess of the blue light, and so then it creates problems, just like if you had too much of one kind of food and not enough of others.
But that should fill up my blue tank, and yet it's still only a third full.
No, it doesn't work that way in terms of filling up your blue tank. What it literally does is it toxifies. It creates a toxicity.
Because of the LED.
The power is very, very strong. And you see, the blue light is very common during the day. It keeps us awake because it suppresses the release of a hormone from the pineal called melatonin, which essentially lets us know when it's time to sleep. And it also has many other uses as well.
Does it also block melanin and black melanin that come from the pineal?
I know less about that, so I won't make any comment about that because it's not an area that I know a great deal about. But the point that I'm trying to make is that during the day, what keeps you awake is an inordinate amount of blue light in the atmosphere. When you use that light in very concentrated doses, which is what comes off our computers, and a lot of people work in the evening, it messes up disrupts their sleep patterns, disrupts their biology, disrupts their hormonal release, all of that. So I would suggest those glasses are good when you're at the computer, and when you're outdoors, wear sunglasses as little as possible, unless you're driving right into the sun and so on. And that will probably balance out over time, just spending more times in natural light.
Right. Yeah, I don't wear sunglasses. So, and I always wonder about people who wear sunglasses all the time,
Right.
what they're really blocking.
Well, we're all conditioned to believe all kinds of things. And that's one of the things that we've been very conditioned to do because it's a wonderful marketing tool. I mean, the optical industry is one of the richest in the world because everyone has been led to believe they have to wear sunglasses, even little children, every time they go outdoors. And there isn't anything environmentally that's healthier for you than sunlight.
Right.
Your whole body runs on this light. So when you change the spectrum by filtering it through sunglasses, you literally lower the octane rating of nature's optimal fuel mix, which is sunlight.
Right. Now, it's not just sunlight coming through our eyes, because the near infrared penetrates deeply into our skin, into our arteries and veins, and stimulates stimulates all kinds of activity.
Well, the near infrared portion of the spectrum constitutes about 50% of the energy coming from the sun. So it is incredibly important. It is jump-starting every cell in the body to do its job, whether it is a metabolic function or a regenerative function or the rebuilding of DNA. Everything that the body needs in terms of function is jump-started by the red and near infrared portion of the spectrum. So it's crucially important. There is
And
not a single physiological function that is not impacted by the near infrared, and it can go into the body as much as about almost 4 inches.
right.
So it impacts all of your glands, your organs, and so on.
So does suntan lotion, the block that so many people think they need so much of, does that block more than the UVBs?
It depends on the suntan lotion. In terms of what I'm suggesting about suntan lotion use is people need to build up their capacity for sunlight because we live so much of our lives indoors. So what I suggest people to do in the privacy of their own yards, if they have the ability, is to step outside with little or no clothing on, lay down for 1 minute on each side for day 1, and maybe day 2, 2 minutes on each side, and then 3 minutes on each side. And what happens is over time, the skin begins to thicken, and it actually causes your own body to protect itself from excessive amount of light. Keep in mind that you get probably your maximum dose of vitamin D synthesis within 30 minutes. And the best time to get that is probably sometime between the early morning and 2 in the afternoon. So the idea is let large portions of your body be radiated by natural light, gradually increase the time, maybe till you can get up to 20 minutes or maybe 30 minutes. And then you'll see where you need it. When I go out, and I live in Hawaii and we're out in the sun a lot, it's rare that I use sunscreens. I might use a little bit on my face, my scalp, and maybe my arms a little bit if it's excessively hot. And those are usually natural tanning lotions. But I do not lather up. Most of my body doesn't get any sunscreen whatsoever.
Right. Now, if you look, my skin is pretty dark right now.
Right.
I've been out in the sun a lot this summer, been at the beach many days on and off during the summer. The whole summer, I haven't used 1 drop of suntan.
Right. Right.
And you build up a base and you're protected.
The other thing that's really interesting is the people with the least amount of skin cancer are the ones that spend the most amount of time in the sun.
Good. Glad to hear that.
You know, melanoma is much more prevalent for people that work indoors under fluorescent lighting than people that spend a great deal of time outdoors. I mean, they've done a lot of statistics on these things. So sunlight is incredibly healthy. You can't live without it.
Right.
And people will feel better just stepping outside.
And monitor the burn. Just don't get too burned. And
if you do it gradually, you won't burn.
Right. And I take high doses of vitamin D, and that protects against sunburn. So that's really been helpful also.
Yeah, I think that for me, between getting out in the sun a lot, I use 5,000 units of vitamin D3 a day. And between that and my natural sun use.
Yeah, you get a lot of sun there.
You know, I'm in a very good range.
I take 40,000 a day.
That's a lot.
My brother is writing a book on vitamin D, so I hear all the latest research, and I'll have him on the show at some point talking about it. But he feels that we all need a lot more vitamin D than we think we do.
He's absolutely right. Most of the diseases of civilization, from cancer to osteoporosis, macular degeneration, diabetes, many of these diseases, Alzheimer's and so on, are all related to vitamin D deficiency.
Right. Now, so, we're getting near the end of the show, so we're going to have to sign off because we are ending the show a little early nowadays because the station is doing some fundraising for the station to help it, and they're going to give an announcement about that at the end of the show. So, Jacob Liberman, the author of Luminous Life, you keep on illuminating us, and I hope you will again soon. There was so much I wanted to talk with you about, and we are doing a lot of that, and there's still more that we can do. So thank you so much.
Have a blessed day. Good to see you always, and thank you everyone who's listening.
Right. And this is Peter Roth, your host of Energy Stew at prn.fm. I can be reached at Peter at Heart River, HEART river.org. I'd love to hear from you, and thanks so much for listening.